Megan Hellerer, welcome to The Truth Is.
Kathryn, I'm so happy to be here.
When I opened your book, the dedication that's here's the guidance you were looking for that you couldn't find at the time. I love talking to writers, especially that talk about, I wrote for the younger me that needed this, that didn't have in a scene that you call this proverbial bathroom floor. And I think when I first messaged you as an invitation to be on the podcast, I was like, I have been on that bathroom floor. Will you just take us to that moment that was this inflection point? And I think I'll offer the reflection. I have been in that moment many times, and I think gone about change in the way that isn't the methodology that you've introduced through your work. And so I'm really curious about what you think made that moment different.
You know, there's an expression that I found to be mostly true, which is we don't change until we're in enough pain. Mm-hmm. And I think that time I was just in enough pain. That was the thing that was really different about it. I think the other thing was also a pride thing, which was I knew I was going to start falling apart in public. You know, that was almost in public, right? Like in the bathroom floor at work, I couldn't even keep it together to like wait to be on my home bathroom floor. There's also an expression, the gift of desperation, that a lot of people in like 12-step groups use. And I think that was a part of it too, which is when you're so desperate, you become willing to do just about whatever it takes to change. And so I think it was a combination of, you know, those couple of things. And it was a few realizations over time. You know, there was a moment where like the thing I'd worked so hard for was this promotion. And I was like, I'm going to, you know, stay up late and pull all night, do whatever, all the things, work so hard. And then you get the thing and you're like, I feel nothing. And I think that was like one of the moments. And then, you know, but I think the physical aspect of it, like it got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. Like it wasn't a choice. And I hope that one of the things that my story can offer and, you know, the invitation is to sort of like raise the bottom, meaning maybe we don't have to be in that much pain in order to make a change, you know, and my hope for myself is that I can see it sooner. You know, maybe it's a little bit of an itch versus, you know, a bottoming out before I'm willing to ask those questions and make that change. And I hope that for other people too, where we don't have to get to that point where it's so bad that we're on the proverbial bathroom floor before we can be like, something isn't working here. Maybe I can like ask some questions about this or make some tweaks. But it was a long time coming. You know, it was, when I look back, I had a sense that this wasn't me, you know, whatever that means. And now, you know, I didn't have language for it at the time, but, you know, directionally writer aligned for me, like pretty much on day one. I had curiosity about it, about being at Google on, you know, on day one and what this was like and what this place was about and what this world was about. And I love to learn. So as long as there's a learning curve, I could be engaged enough. But I had a sense that this wasn't me. And yet here I was 8 years later, increasingly becoming more distant from myself, more desperate, more depressed, more anxious, and trying all of these things to see what I could do to change it. And just realizing like, who am I? And feeling like there are no more levers I can pull to make this work. And there was a sense of failure in that. Like that wasn't, that didn't feel like you know, it felt like I was giving up or that I couldn't hack it until I was able to like rethink some of those things. But it felt like my entire world, it felt like I was viscerally, you know, and I say this in the book, it felt viscerally like I was going to die. And everything that I had clung to belief wise and, you know, for my stability and my sanity and identity, I had to let go of all of that. And I know so many people confront that.
Yeah. A friend recommended your book to me probably like 4 times before I was like, all right, let's do it. And as soon as I heard that first chapter, I was like, oh, this is me. I have been here again and again. And I had made the decision to step away from my most recent corporate role with no plan. And I shared with you that this book, your book, and your methodology became a new articulation and the right articulation of like what I needed to be my compass leading through the last 6 months. And so I'm privileged to be able to sit down with you and talk about your journey that ultimately I see led to this contrast between two very different worldviews and ways of living. And so many, since I've been on this journey and sharing this podcast, I've reconnected with all different people through different chapters of my life and that are in similar moments. And so I'm like, what a good person to help us understand what is at play on a really deeply personal level, because so many people can see themselves in that moment of, wait,
Mhm.
this is not working anymore. And I've done all the things but I'm miserable. I'm miserable. Like that was my experience. And to what you said, and it's such an important part of the way you share this through your book, and I'm sure in your coaching, is it's not your fault. Like let's release the shame around it. So all that preamble to say, I'm so grateful to bring you into the space of the podcast, because a lot of my audience and my community that I've been in conversation with is like, I'm in this moment too. And I'm making a choice to step away because I know this isn't working
Yep.
anymore and I need to release it. But I would love to start with just reflecting on the you in that moment. What did she not see was possible yet?
I didn't understand that clarity comes in action, that you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to know where you're going in order to begin. So it's not that I wasn't asking the question or wondering, I think I want to do something else. What should I do?
Yeah.
I just thought I had to be able to answer that question before I could make a change. And I think that is the biggest issue with this old paradigm that I call destinational living, which is thinking we need to know the destination. And then once we pick it, we have to commit to it and brute force, blind ambition our way there. In reality, that doesn't actually work. It's not actually real. And even if we can somehow make it work, it doesn't actually give us what we think we want, which is typically fulfillment, right? Like when people say they want to be successful, what they usually mean is they want to feel successful. And the feeling of successful, that's fulfillment. We're looking for fulfillment through success. And I think the biggest myth that I believed and of this old paradigm that most millennials have grew up with is that achievement is the path to fulfillment. If you achieve enough, if you check enough boxes, if you're successful on paper, inevitably you will become fulfilled. And the problem comes when you have all of the success and none of the fulfillment, which is the
Mm-hmm.
position that many people who've like climbed the corporate ladder find themselves experiencing to some degree or another. And that's where I was. I had all this success and none of the fulfillment. And what do you do with that? And so there was a lot of, unlearning of those things I needed to do. But nobody was coming to hold my hand on the bathroom floor and being like, I've been there. I got this. Here is like the framework that you've been taught and that you're thinking in. And don't worry, like, it's not your fault. You're not alone in this. There are so many other, what I now call underfulfilled overachievers. And
Yeah.
there is another way. And when I started looking for that other way, even when I like surrendered, so to speak, and was like, I give up, I need to step away, no plan, I'm going to figure this out, and found that sort of resource within myself. And I was ready to ask for help. There wasn't, this was
Mm-hmm.
back in 2013, 2014. People weren't talking about this in the same way. It was like prime girl boss, lean in time.
Yeah.
And coaching wasn't what it was today. And nobody was saying like,
Yeah.
hey, this whole paradigm, this whole framework that we're operating within, it's actually not working. And I think I knew on some level, I couldn't just keep doing the same thing I'd been doing and expect different results, right? Like that's the definition of insanity. And so it was figuring out what are these, what did that version of me not know? It was one, like the way to figure out the answer is to get into motion, to live directionally, to take an action, any action. And, we can dive deeper into any of these concepts, but start following your curiosity instead of worrying so much about purpose or passion and defining what that is and figuring out where you're going. And then releasing these pieces of thinking I need to know the destination, and that success was going to inherently yield fulfillment.
For some reason, it brought me back to, it's a quick anecdote, being a college athlete. And I was on a team in Rochester, New York that was like a 500 team, like solid college program, but great university. And then all of a sudden, my junior year of the program, my third year, I was the team captain. And we had like this Cinderella season, and we made the Elite Eight, the top 8 of the country. But the process was like, we just kept surprising ourselves. And it was like, what is happening? And we couldn't believe what was happening, right? And that season, it gives me goosebumps to remember it. And I was an All-American, which was like, what even is that? Like, it was so crazy to then all of a sudden have this moment. The lesson, though, came the next year when I went back for my senior year, my last year as a college athlete. And I was like, if we don't make the top 4 teams in the country, this is a failure. And I was so rigid. And I was like, if I don't get an All-American again, how embarrassing. Like, in the distinction in those 2 years for me, how the story ends is I was so rigid in that experience. We lost the last 8 games of the season, and I was not proud of how I led. And I couldn't really understand it at the time. But now I look back on it and I was like, oh yeah, like that expectation of what it needed to be ruined the entire experience. And it's every once in a while, the lesson of that, the athlete comes back, and it's interesting to see the fulfillment versus the expectation, and the expectation of the destination.
Yeah. And when we get so attached to a specific outcome, we really cannibalize it for ourselves. One is oftentimes sometimes we can achieve that outcome and then it still doesn't feel good. But sometimes there's another outcome that we could have achieved. And again, I don't know what it would have been in that scenario. Maybe maybe you just had like the most amazing bonded season with your team and you did well, but not quite as well, but it was still this like crowning achievement or something else, some other way of unfolding. But because you were so set on the specific destination that you had determined was the thing that had to be, you sort of cannibalized the experience, and you gain lessons from, like, it had to happen that way because you've learned, you've learned from it. But that is so similar to how these things go. I see it with people starting companies. They're like, this is what the company needs to be, and we're going to make this happen. And they just keep like banging their head against a wall when what we miss is all the hints and the clues and the cues of small tweaks we could have made along the way to pivot or rearrange to become what it's actually meant to become. I sometimes talk about it as like the scientific method for life, meaning we have a hypothesis. So it's not that we're just wandering, although sometimes wandering is essential, but it's not that there's no sort of structure or framework. But in the scientific method, you have a hypothesis or you have a question that's meant to structure the experiment. But really the goal there of that hypothesis is not to prove yourself right. It's to find the truth. And so you could have had a hypothesis that was like, I want to be a more successful or more winning team than we were last year. And then to figure out what that means or how you go about that. Or in a company, you're like, I think this is what we're building. But sometimes you find out like, oh, that's actually not what the market needed, but you had to start on that path to realize it needed this other thing. But if you're so focused on that one trajectory, you miss all of the things that are directing you and all of the information that's showing you another way forward.
Totally. And I love following like your personal thread that led to all of this revelation and ultimately your work. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about what happened from that moment of, all right, something has to change. And I just want to read one part of it that I really love that you get to is this idea that like the questions you were asking progressed and evolved. And you say in your book, my question, what am I doing with my life, had morphed into what are we doing with our lives? And then finally, what did they tell us to do with our lives, with the critical addenda of how the hell do we stop doing it and what do we do instead? And so I'm curious to ask you how you feel like that bubbled up in you as you were running this experiment of what not to do.
I think, it really started as obviously a self-centered, and I mean that in, the most truest meaning of that word, like a self-focused question of, what am I doing with my life? But also in that was this belief that something was broken about me, that I couldn't figure this out, right? That like, how am I like so privileged with so much education, blah, 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 with this like best job in the world, best company in the world. And this is like on paper, everything I had worked so hard for, and I'm so miserable. As I realized like I have to step back with no plan, and everyone thought I was totally nuts. And I really thought I was going to go back, right? Like I thought I was going to like eat, pray, love my way around the world, like take care of my anxiety, do a little therapy, whatever, and figure out my way back. But I started to realize more and more that if I did that, I was just going to end up in the exact same place in some future point again and again and again. And then what happened is, in looking for someone to help me, I really couldn't find anyone who was talking about like, what is the other way? There has to be some alternative way to approach career where I can be ambitious and have drive, because that is a true part of me. And again, in like the truest sense of the meaning of ambition, my friend Amina Altai, who wrote a beautiful book that came out this year called The Ambition Trap, she talks about how ambition is natural and normal. And it is, it really is, natural and neutral, right? There's nothing, it's not good or bad. And it is like it's the desire, I talk about it as the desire for more life, right? To grow, to unfold. And people have that desire to different degrees. And for me and for many underfulfilled overachievers, it's a genuine, strong desire that I think is one of our biggest assets. And to not, like, it felt like I had this choice of either leaning in or leaning out. And it was like, there has to be a third way, like I don't want to abandon my ambition. That feels true to me. I want to contribute. I want to make an impact, and I can't keep doing it in the way that I was doing it. So like, what's the other way? And the more I started sharing that with others, the more I realized just how many of us were in this position. Like I was not alone in this. And that was certainly a revelation to begin with. And so then it's like, what are all of us doing? Like, what are we all doing? We're all so miserable and burnt out. And some of like the smartest, most brilliant, creative, like, wonderful, genuine, authentic, spiritual, generous people were all miserable, hating their jobs. And I was like, this is not, the math isn't mathing here.
Right. Well, and I'll just interrupt you to say that point in your book. Oh my God, I just flipped to the page. I obviously highlighted it because my podcast is called The Truth Is, where you're finally at like a networking cocktail party. And you were like, instead I did something radical. I told the truth about exactly where I was. And then what your experience was that instantly gave people in your proximity permission to do the same. What sense do you make? And there's so many questions swirling in my head around this moment that we're in that I'm still figuring out how to articulate, but that we're all in this shared, for lack of a better word, lie or performance that it's all great, or that we're doing the things we should. I love the part where you're like, I checked all the boxes. And the one that I wrote in my notes was pretend sexism and misogyny are things of the past. And so I feel like we're in this moment of reckoning, and which is why this conversation in your work feels so timely.
Yeah, I think we are as a culture and as a society, 100% in this moment of reckoning. I think in about work and in about a lot of other things too. And I think COVID really did shift this in a lot of ways, or at least it accelerated people's willingness to see that the way we are working is not working.
And can I ask you how you make sense of what that era was and why it's over and what we're in now, or why that isn't working anymore?
I think it's based on the destinational living that we were talking about, this old paradigm. And there are a few, maybe 3 pillars, I would say. The first one is, how do we determine there's a homogeneity that comes to leaning in? What are we leaning into, right? And we're leaning into the shoulds, right? The external expectations and conditioning of what success looks like or what achievement looks like, right? So we're not coming in the lean in model. You're looking outside of yourself to be told what to do, what is worthwhile, what is important. And that's a huge thing that needs to shift, right? Which is because we're saying, okay, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a tech executive, be a whatever. But success isn't one size fits all. So it isn't arbitrary. It's deeply personal. And we haven't been asking the question. And I think for the most part in the lean in era, it's like success for success's sake. And
as decided by this external idea that, quite frankly, was not designed by everyone for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is who is invested in us living destinationally, meaning we pick a destination that somebody else told. And the only way you can have a destination, by the way, is by listening to someone else, because our inner navigation system only knows what's right for us in the present.
Yeah.
So we can, again, have a hypothesis of, I think this might be leading me to XYZ, but we can't know where we want to be in 10 years, let alone where the world is going to be. So anytime we find ourselves committed to something in the future in that way, it's coming from some sort of external norm or expectation. So that's the first thing. And these expectations, who is invested in us adopting them? The people who are in power already, right? And those were not created with everyone in mind. The second thing is we've been persuaded, like, why was everyone working so hard and like rise and grind and, burning out and all of those things and hustle culture? They thought they were going to get something from it, right? If you work hard enough, you're going to get what? Success.
Yeah.
What do you think you're going to get from success? I think there are 2 things. One, fulfillment, right? That feeling of success that we were talking about. And the other is safety and security. And that is capitalism. And that part is hard and sucks because that is the world that we live in, which is
right.
And all of I talk about this a little bit too, like health insurance is linked to having a job, right? So it's like, it actually linked, like our true, like social welfare benefits are linked to our.
I wrote in the margin of your book, like, interesting, my company provided the benefit that allowed me to afford therapy, and I needed therapy in order to continue performing that job.
Totally. It's the same reason why companies like offer like egg freezing benefits or whatever, right?
And you were in like the epicenter of, we're going to pick you up at your front door and you're going to have free breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you're going to play foosball, and that whole boom of becoming a part of something. Yeah.
So we really were persuaded that if you made the right decisions and you worked at the right places and you worked hard enough, that you could obtain more success, right? I call it productivity hoarding. We were sold this thing that, like, if I'm just more productive enough, I will prove my worth, and then I will be safe and also successful, AKA fulfilled. Right. And so we were sold this idea that hustle culture leads us to have the like best, most meaningful, fulfilled life that we can.
Right.
And the problem is now a lot of people got to that level of success and realized that that was a myth. And it doesn't hold up for most people. And so now we have to sort of like, we're doing the work of deconstructing it. So why are we kind of, first of all, it didn't work because people are burning out and they're also miserable, right?
Yeah.
So like,
And I'll just offer real quick as you continue, I did this meditation weekend as I was getting ready to step away from my most recent role. And the lovely teacher was like, I think my mission is to eradicate capitalism from our bodies. And I was at such a point of burnout where I was just like, my reaction was, girl, I think I've got a lot of capitalism in my body. And by the end of the weekend, I could feel that how much rest was needed. And I was left with the question, can I eradicate capitalism from my body and still participate in it? And I feel like that's paralleled to the work that this is.
One thing that has been very important to me to understand, which this is not my original thought, is that commerce and capitalism are different things.
Interesting.
So earning money, selling things on a marketplace, exchanging things is not the same as extractive capitalism.
Right.
So like me coaching for services, there's a way to do that is extractive capitalist, and there is a way to do that that's like an honest trade for services, right? So I think that distinction, holding that in mind, like commerce versus capitalism, and it's not, there's not a clear line about it. Again, ideally, work is something that allows you to is the fullest expression of yourself.
Yeah.
And I've seen over and over and over and over again how that is possible.
Yeah.
We are not taught how to do that. And so I think there are a few different elements here, but one, like what was going on with the girl boss hustle culture, we were sold this promise, like capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacist promise, but that success equals fulfillment, right? That productivity earned you safety and fulfillment and a good life. And that there's like a through line there. And if you just like do it's all tied up with the American dream. So that was one thing that I call it the achievement lie, right? There's no amount of achieving that's going to earn you safety, period. There's no amount of achieving the things that aren't aligned for you that is going to earn you fulfillment. And I think really disconnecting that doesn't mean don't achieve. It just means we have to interrogate and rethink the ways that we are discovering what it is that we want to put our minds to achieving.
I love the way you brought it to that because, some of what we were talking about, it's like all of the external noise and conversation and cultural context versus your truth and versus you starting to look into like, why am I doing this and for what? And it brings me back to that moment where you shared it in that group that networking moment of like, this is where I'm at. And so I'd love to go back to that journey for you that, to me, what I feel that I have such reverence for is this really feeling of self-accountability that like I'm on this path and it's on me to figure this out.
There's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is there's no one who's going to figure this out for you. There's not one other single person who can tell you this is the thing that's right for you, or this is what's going to lead fulfillment, or this is going to lead to success. The good news is there's no one who can tell you that, right? So bad news, it's all on you. Good news, there's so much freedom in that too, right?
So will you take us a little bit through that journey of, I love that distinction of you spent time from when you left the job, you then spent time experimenting with figuring out what it wasn't. And there was also this flavor of, I love the page where you talk about, I was doing all the things. And then what was then the inflection point to figuring out where your curiosity was ultimately leading you to?
It took a while from when I left Google where I had to have this sort of like ego and identity death where I really let go of this idea that I was, that this corporate thing was going to be for me. And I really committed to truly like deep down, I do not care about the optics of whatever else I do with the rest of my life. If it means like moving to the Midwest and working in food service, and that is what truly lights me up, then I am very happy to do that, right? And like truly coming to it with that humility. So I took this coaching class and it just clicked. Like everything, I was just like consumed with this feeling of like rightness, like right time, right place, right thing. Like it was just, it spoke to me on such a level that I hadn't had that experience in a very long time. And I think in hindsight, it was the focus on what do I want? I think, again, one of the relics or remnants of, or symptoms of even like girl boss hustle culture, what I call destinational living, is this idea that our curiosity is a distraction.
Yeah.
Right. It was something to ignore, to forego. It was getting in your way. And so it was sort of like there was a reclamation of that kind of came along with it. That I think that was the most important thing I got from that. And then, of course, I was like, this is too fun and too awesome and definitely can't be a career. So I didn't go back for like 3 months. But I kept thinking about it. And finally, I was like, all right, well, I don't know why I feel such a connection to this, but I need to follow it. And to get certified, you had to get 100 hours of paid coaching. So I sent an email to a few friends being like, hey, like, here's what I'm doing. I'll coach you for a cup of coffee. Here's kind of what I'm thinking about and wrestling with.
Yeah.
I might be able to help you if you're one of these people who's like in corporate and miserable and like has all the success and none of the fulfillment. Although I didn't have that sort of articulation. I didn't have it that well articulated yet. A bunch of people responded and their lives started changing. My life was changing and I loved doing it. And I was like, wow, maybe like I love doing this. And it seems like it's helping in a way that I hadn't felt like I was contributing or helpful in a long time.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of curiosity about like, what were we all doing with our lives, and starting to see some of the patterns there. And sort of like before I knew it, like they were renewing for more sessions. They were referring people to me. And I had like a whole roster of clients before I even finished the certification. And still, I was skeptical. But I committed in the same way that I'd committed when I left Google. I'm going to give myself 6 months of like not updating my resume and not applying for jobs or taking any job interviews because I knew I would just get scared and like take the next thing that was coming because I felt insecure and worried about it. I made a similar 6-month commitment to myself of I'm going to try this for 6 months and I'm going to give it that full 6 months. And like, I planned it so that even if I, again, looking at my Google stock and being like, all right, even if this is, I make $0 in this time, like I can do this for 6 months. And it felt like something I couldn't not do. And that's what I'm always looking for people. It's like, what is the thing you feel like you can't not do eventually? And so I gave it a try. Again, it just continued to be this thing that I couldn't not do. From there, many other things unfolded, working with AOC, the press that came with that, getting the opportunity to write a book, like speaking, coaching, workshops, all of these other things that I've gotten to do. And who knows what will continue to unfold from here. But that was the initial, like, I'm curious about going to this coaching class. All right, I'm just going to take one more step. Like, I'm going to take the next section and the next section. Okay, I'm going to get certified. Okay, sure. I'll coach a few people. Oh, wow, that is working. Like, let me do more of that. And even through the way that I've been building my business, like, who is it that I'm working with and all of those pieces of it as well.
One of the things I love most is that you don't have to know where it's going to go. And, we grow up, follow purpose or passion, but only it better work out is kind of like the warning. And I love the distinction you make between passion and curiosity or purpose and curiosity. And so I'd love to have you talk a little bit about that. And, I think about the AOC example because it's such an unexpected example of the work. Because from where I sit, I didn't realize that story, of course, until I read it in your book. And you're like, wait a second, this is somebody that is such a force in their field and in their work. And to think that, similar to you, they couldn't have expected that it's where it would lead.
Right. And that's why it's an example that I like to share is because one, it's like, one, her story is one that we're familiar with, but two, it's so unexpected. And if she had done things in the traditional way of like, what's the outcome? Is it guaranteed? Can I make sure I can predict that? Like, she would not be doing what she's doing now because it was far from certain. And so I think that's, a really important one piece of like, we don't know, especially in the world, but like, and tech, but AI, like there used to be things that you could plausibly say, like, this is a safe job, right? Like, or if you major in this, you're always going to be employed. That doesn't exist anymore, right? Even in the past 5 years, 2 years, people are talking about, engineers, people who were like, that was the safe job. Now, AI has taken over those too. And so there is this sort of like myth of certainty that we're required to buy into in order to believe in this destinational living. We really have to change our relationship with certainty. And the idea that certainty or guarantee is like the best way to make decisions or plan your life. Because what uncertainty means, and we're so scared of it, but uncertainty just means it's new. It means it hasn't been done before. That's the very definition of creativity. This podcast, uncertain, because even this conversation, because it's never been done before. So we have to create it as we go. But you don't not enter a conversation because you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, Right. And so the only way to do something original, authentic, to create in the truest meaning of that word. That doesn't mean like you're a creative in the sense that you're an artist, but building something new is to tolerate uncertainty. And I think that is the biggest missing skill set that we need now. Is our ability to tolerate uncertainty. And it's such an incredible, not just because we have to, but it unlocks so much freedom and potential when you are able to sort of rebrand uncertainty for yourself as possibility.
You said it, and I'll just mirror it back. You say so well. Even that destinational living paradigm, it's under the assumption that things are predictable. And there's, I'm a yoga teacher and meditation teacher as well. And one of the teachers I studied under is like, anytime we try to control an outcome, we're playing God, and we are not God. And so this surrender into, we actually don't know what's going to happen. And so why not like be alive in that and in the driver's seat, step by step of that. I'm in that experiment, just like you said, with this podcast. And I have these really cool moments where I DM'd you because your book means so much to me and your work is so aligned with these conversations. And here you are on the podcast. And yesterday I released an episode with one of my favorite writers. And I'm like, just take in for a second that you would never have been able to predict it, that you're sitting down with him.
You're doing the experiment so well in the sense that you could discover that this is the thing, right? And it blows up and you're doing this for the rest of your life and you love it and it's filling you up and you feel so good about what you're offering to the world and how it's helping people and changing people. Or it could be that it leads you to something else, who knows what it is, but you discover actually, not even that it's not helpful to people, but you're like, actually, I don't love this that much, but like, I love the conversations I was having. So maybe it's this, it's this other thing, or it's this other way that I'm doing things, or maybe I love these conversations, but I don't love doing it in this medium. Maybe it's a Substack or whatever. There's so many ways that it can unfold. And allowing it, like, obviously your hypothesis in doing this is that like, this is something, I want to do,
totally.
Or this is on purpose, or this is aligned for me. But staying open and not attached to an outcome is the way, like being able, even in this moment, to be able to be curious of, where am I being led? I think is like the most beautiful question, right? Like, where is this leading me? Where am I being led? And trying to sort of like listen from that angle, which releases so much of the outcome.
Totally. It's in the microcosm of this conversation. Like I've learned this, I'm also an actor and have been in theater for a long time. And I'm constantly learning these lessons where it's like, just meet the truth of the moment. And I see that in how you speak to your work with your clients. And certainly the example of AOC, where it was like, maybe this doesn't make intellectual sense to go to this protest, but I'm going to go. And then something unexpected opens up from that. But there's something about trusting the moment and trusting yourself in the moment that feels like a lot of that shift.
Yeah. And it's sort of, I know one of the best articulations I can of directional living, or all of this that we're talking, what I categorize as directional living, but all this new paradigm is E.L. Doctorow's quotation, where he's talking about writing a novel, but I think it applies to life, which is, it's like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as the headlights in front of you, but you can make the whole trip that way. And like, just coming back to, if you don't know the answer, if you're feeling confused, it's like, okay, where are the headlights showing me? Like, what are my headlights showing me? And to me, that's like, where's curiosity and where is joy? And in this moment, right? Like, just from what I know now. And from there, you can make small steps that start to elongate and get longer and sort of coalesce and become more coherent. But you can start where you don't need to know where you're going. And I think there's such, there can be freedom and relief in that if we allow it.
To look even a peek at what your methodology and work looks like with your client. And it's so beautifully outlined in your book. I remember earlier this year, like some of the exercises, like journaling on people that you're jealous of, that was huge for me. But I would love to, like, for you with a new client, or even someone that's like, I don't know how to connect to that. What is the starting point? How do you bring someone into the idea of really unlearning and shifting to a new way of being? What's the starting point?
So yeah, with a new client or someone who I'm encountering for the first time, the first thing, I call it like an inner compass calibration, right? Is to figure out what is something that was a good, right, aligned decision for you. Or a person who you trust. For some people, it's their spouse or a pet or a parent. Or, for me, for example, this is coaching. In contrast to, what do you know was a misaligned or wrong decision for you? For me, Google as shorthand, right? And then this is not a thinking exercise, right? And I think this is the biggest thing that we missed out on, or that we aren't taught about decision making, is that we're taught that it is a logical thing. We should be doing it based on logic and facts and pros and cons lists. And it actually is not that. Most of the time, we can make a pros and cons list and we can argue for both directions. And most of the time, they're equally valid.
Totally.
So it actually doesn't help us. Decision making, of course, fact check with logic, right? Like this, I'm not saying be irresponsible or impulsive, but the starting point for decision making and figuring out what you want is actually, it's a felt sense. And so we want to like drop down. And so having these two touch points of like something that was a right decision for you and something was a wrong decision for you, or an environment. For some people, it's like, or time in your life that you like felt just totally yourself. So think of these two things and then sort of toggle back and forth, holding them, like sort of trying them on to feel what that feels like for you. This is like the easiest shortcut. So for me, I think of Google, and immediately contraction or hard and heavy is the feeling that I have, versus like expansion, and so notice whatever those things are for you. They're like the tells of you are in this sort of warmer or colder, like, am I on the warmer side or the colder side of this dynamic? Is this more aligned and sort of like me and authentic to me? Or is this misaligned and not authentic to me? And once you start to get familiar with that, and is to start testing it out in your daily life in small ways. And this can be a complete revelation. There's a story I tell in the book about basically doing this in the Kleenex aisle, right? Where it's like, I couldn't even figure out what Kleenex box design felt true to me. And I could totally go to like, oh, this friend would like this, and this friend would, and like an interior design expert would say this. And I did not know which one I liked. And obviously that's, a small example, and maybe like, who cares, right? But even thinking about what you're eating, right? Like, what do I really want for dinner? Is it, and I'm not even saying it needs to be between like chocolate cake and a salad, right? It could be like, chicken or fish. And like, so I can Many people would be like, oh, well, I had chicken last night, so I should have fish tonight, and da-da-da, and I'm trying to get my omegas and blah, 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 or whatever the things are. But like really asking yourself that question and being like, what feels warmer or colder, or what you're going to wear that day, or what TV show, or what book, like these simple ways, and starting to practice to just get used to having that be your default check-in to determine an answer before you go external. And the thing is that our inner navigation system or inner compass, whatever, your intuition doesn't know the difference between a decision about a Kleenex box or what you're having for dinner and like whether or not to start a podcast or whether or not to write a book. Like big decision, small decision, doesn't matter. The mechanism is the same.
Yeah.
And so that is where I like to start with people, because we need to learn to use it and to trust it. And so most of the exercises in the beginning are like geared towards getting comfortable with that and noticing that. Before a session with a client, it'll be like, list 10 things you were curious about this past week or things that sparked interest for you. It could be a conversation you had. It could be a show you watched, a quote, like something you saw on the internet, like whatever it is. And we can start from there to start pattern recognition, right? Like what are the themes here? But at first you have to be able to notice the things that you're interested and curious about and care about it.
And I love the broadened aperture for it's not just being curious about career in a silo. It's broadening it to like, where is your curiosity in the broader realm of your entire life? And which is why I so appreciate it's not just a methodology for career. It's looking at your holistic life and living life as yourself.
We are looking for wholeness. And many people need a sense of meaning and purpose in order to feel whole. And that can come through paid work. It can come from volunteer work. It can come from caretaking, unpaid caretaking. It can come from so many different places. But where that comes from and what that looks like the universe, whatever, like your inner navigation system, it doesn't note like, oh, this is work, this is not work. And so, there's another thing where, we may find our way into our work. And this is not something where I'm saying every hobby should become monetized.
Sure.
That's not the idea here. But when we discover when we're following our curiosity in one part of our lives, we tend to follow it in another part of our lives. When we're being more aligned in one part of our life, that tends to show up in a different part of our life. When we're more fulfilled at work, we tend to be a better spouse, partner, parent, friend, daughter, whatever, all of these things. And vice versa, And so when there's something that's misaligned in any part of your life, it's affecting all the other parts of our lives. Like as much as we try to compartmentalize, and yes, it's appropriate for different parts of ourselves to step forward in different environments and different realms. But we can't, our psychology doesn't totally change in these different places, like we're one body and our body chemistry shows up the same in all of these different places. And our defaults and our coping mechanisms show up in all the same in different places. And so in the same way that they can all build on each other. So it's like, start wherever. And see, once you're in this practice of being in relationship with your curiosity and with joy, it will start to flourish in all different parts of your life.
To that exact point, I was curious to ask you whether in your experience in your own life or through your work with your clients, you talk about there's a relief to the conclusion that I don't have to know where I'm going. And as I feel my way into that, I have to say there's moments of panic where I want to jump and cling to something. But then when I can get back to the trust, overall, I find a little bit of a diminishment of the anxiety and stress that I used to feel kind of chronically in my life.
I often say it's like the best anti-anxiety pill around. Yeah. Right? When you no longer are trying to, anxiety is future thinking, right? It's future forecasting. And when you realize like you cannot predict the future, again, that doesn't mean you're not going to have passing thoughts about it. But when you release the belief that you should know, right? That that's knowable or that that's something you're meant to be figuring out. When the thoughts come, it's like, oh yeah, I don't have to know that. or
Mm-hmm.
that's impossible to know. And it can become a wondering, like, I wonder how this will unfold. I wonder what's going to come next. I wonder where this will lead, which is so much more rewarding and peaceful and enjoyable than I need to know what this is going to be, and I need to make sure it becomes this, and like that sort of controlling and clinging part of it. And so that was an unexpected piece for me going through it myself, was like, I thought we think that the way to get rid of the anxiety is to plan and to know and to figure out the future. In reality, the way to get rid of the anxiety is to stop trying to know.
Yeah. Yep.
It's very counterintuitive.
It is, because I assumed walking away from the stability I had would be a spiral downwards. And what's funny, I say this sometimes to friends, 7 months in, I could not have predicted that I would feel more grounded and more like sure of myself, and that I'm on the right path, which is like a shift in the visceral experience. You're like, is this real? And I'm like, no, I feel rooted in the not knowing, which is absolutely, you're right, not at all what I could have anticipated.
And this is, I mean, I share that AOC said this, like, even before she won the, still was running or had decided to be a candidate, but certainly did not think she was going to win and did not know what was going to come after that, right? Was still waitressing. But what she said is like, I feel, it feels like the light after, the dark, like the dawn after the dark. And, she felt like clear and confident and grounded in the not knowing. Because she knew she was on the directionally right path, whatever that was. And I say this to people a lot. They'll be like, how long is it going to take? Yeah. And I'm like, first of all, it doesn't end, like this is forever. But also you will feel less anxious, more grounded, more clear before you have like the answers, right? Before you have the path that you can articulate, like internally, you will feel clearer once you're on the way, even before you have anything to show for it.
The other thing I'm glad, one thing I wanted to reflect in the AOC example, it's a lesson from my acting training that's like, people talk about auditioning and they're like, you need to go into an audition not needing to book the job, at least energetically. And there's something to me in how magnetic she is, in that you can feel that she's not attached to you electing her. And because of that, she is so solid in her why. And it feels so counterintuitive, but I think it's another beautiful example of the letting go of that.
Yeah.
And actually that, I don't know if you have a relationship to the idea of manifestation, but it's interesting to me that then it's like more undeniable, the why, and that the path will take care of itself.
Totally. And I think, she's so clear in her why is to like be of service and to have the most impact. And if it is through the roles like in office in the way she is now or other offices, then great. And if it's not, then she trusts that that's the place that she's meant to be. She will be of service and have impact in those places. It's not, there is no blind ambition, right? It's aligned ambition, meaning what is right for me right now, given the moment that I'm in and given the moment that the world is in.
Yep.
And I think, again, also realizing that there's like this co-creation that is happening, that there is so much that is truly out of our control. And, but there's a playfulness that can happen with that too. Like what new opportunities are going to come? Or how are the things, how is the zeitgeist going to shift in a way that I can fit into?
Totally.
Is a really, I don't know, like an inspiring way to think.
Well, for me, it connects back to your comparison between like capitalism, or I might say like hyper capitalism, and commerce. I remember reading this great book where this guy writes about the invention of the corporation. And it's like, you're just to your words, it used to just be just makers and customers. And it almost gets back into that dynamic. Like if I'm in my own resonance, they will find me. And I feel that even with this podcast, like I'm like, it surprises me, the people that are like, hey, I loved that. And I'm like, it's to be in the surprise of it has been the most fulfilling.
And that is impossible in the destinational living, right? That's a
Yeah.
great, like when you are so set on a path and an outcome, there's no magic. There's no
Yeah.
room for magic. Like maybe you will get that outcome, maybe you won't. And those are the two options, right? And in reality, either way, you're going to be unfulfilled. Like either way, it's not going to feel good if it's not aligned
Right.
for you. You get the destination you thought you wanted, it doesn't feel like what you thought you wanted. You don't get it, you're disappointed and you feel like a failure, but you didn't want it anyway, but you don't even know that yet.
Yeah. And then you're like, I should be happy, but I'm crying.
Yeah, but it's like a double bind. Like there's no winning in that
Yeah,
scenario.
totally.
And I think, again, it's like this collective delusion that we, again, for obvious reasons about power and blah, 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 blah. But like, I do think it's starting to crumble and it's starting to break. And I don't think the only answer is, relinquish all ambition or desire for contribution.
Go to the woods. Because I've thought, we've all had that moment of, should I just go live off the grid or some form of that?
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, what is the hardest for you right now? What is the hardest thing in this moment or this transition of where you are right now?
A lot of the biggest fear for me, and it's my own stuff that I'm sure is transferable to many, is like financial security and stability, and in figuring out how to be in that in between of feeling this grounded certainty that I know this is building to something. And yeah, I might need to supplement with other things to make it happen. Figuring that out is the hardest for me. I could say sometimes it's just lonely, but that usually comes back pretty quickly, that I'm reminded that I'm not. But for me, it's the trusting the trust I feel that it's gonna return, or as you said, I'm gonna reach that like moment where I feel the answer.
And what is the most like exciting or fun thing for you, right? What are you most excited about?
Having like being in the container of these conversations. I said to my friend I caught up with earlier, I go, James, I dreamt of like living a life where I'm in like a contemplative community space. And I'm like, it's having these conversations where the thing I love most is that I am a student of them. I don't know the answer of how to live true to yourself. Like I'm in the studentship of it. So it's sitting in this space.
I love that so much. And I'm curious, you asked me, in the beginning, like what made that moment, my bathroom floor moment, different? What made your bathroom floor different? Like what made you actually take the step to leave or know it was time?
Well, I got to say, it was the day after the most recent election, a little over a year ago. And I flew to New York and I saw Oh Mary on Broadway. And that day, to be honest, the door opened an inch for me because of the woman I worked for. And we were talking about what 2026 was going to look like. And through that conversation, it was the question of, if we have a place for you, if you want to be here, like it's going to be an intense year. And I think on an intuitive level, she knew I was ready. And I think if she didn't give me that, it makes me emotional, that inch, I probably would have stayed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then once I think that question was gifted to me, it was like, oh yeah, it's time.
And I think that is such a great, like the magic question I always say is like, where's the freedom and where's the relief? And like, just like that is when she asked you that,
Relief.
like, yeah.
Of and it makes me emotional because I
love that you say she gifted it to you. That really is an incredible,
because it's the paradox of, no, I can do a good job for you. I'm going to cling on to this. I'm a vice president at 30. Like what? Like, no. But that she could see like, there's more for you to go figure out. Yeah. So but you're right. It felt like an elephant stepped off me.
Yeah. And I think I always say that, like, when people are like, oh, I don't know, is it fear? Is it intuition? Is it anxiety? Or is it, my true self? I'm always like, where's the freedom and where's the relief? Like, that will
Yeah.
never steer you.
The relief. Oh my God. For whatever reason, it reminds me of, I helped my dad after 30 years in private medical practice in a small town outside of Buffalo, just face the moment that it was time to close it. And I'll say this, and then I think he'd be comfortable with me sharing this. I remember sitting down with him and saying, "You've done everything for us for 30 years. You don't have to do
Mm.
this alone." And you could feel that relief.
Mm.
And it brings me to, I really wanted to ask you, I appreciate you asking me these questions. It's like a free coaching session,
Mm.
mini one. In your role as a coach, in the work you do now, do you have a reflection on, sometimes it can feel like we're in such an individualized moment. We're so focused on individualism, but I don't know, your work and what you just had me reflect on just as this divine reminder that we don't have to do it alone. My experiences with whether it's a peer or a coach in my life, it's just this the relief of not having to figure it out.
It's so I think it's so important and so much easier to do when you have someone else able to, reflect back to you, or like, there are people who've talked about your brain can be like a dark attic, don't go in there alone. And I feel like it can be so helpful just to, like, to have someone sort of sort things through with you, and not to be so alone in it, and to have, I think, like, the normalization and the validation and just having someone else see it, let alone the, like, accountability, encouragement, and all of those things is huge. And then, of course, like, the insight, right, or the, like, expertise of whatever the coach is, and the experience and the patterns that the coach is bringing to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, I don't think we're meant to do it alone. And, I sort of end the book on this note of, like, the directional living movement, which is, if you are living in this way, a lot of times people think that it's being selfish, right? Like, who am I to figure out what I actually want to be doing? Or, like, why should I get to be fulfilled? And the reality is that, like, it's selfish is, like, being full of yourself in, like, the truest sense of the meaning, is like knowing yourself and being able to share the fullest, realest, most authentic version of yourself with the world. The goal is to have the unique contribution and impact that you can have. It is about you, but it's also way more.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about you. And when you can live from your truest self, you give others permission to do the same. And it's a deeply hopeful way to live, which is this, like, trusting the unfolding and trusting possibility, and that, there's the not needing to know where we're going, that there's always, like, a new opportunity, or we can always tweak things. Like, nothing has to be perfect on the first try. We're all works in progress. The world is a work in progress. Democracy is a work in progress. Our lives, our marriages, our whatever, workplaces. And if you can come at it from that angle, it's, like, not only deeply compassionate, but it really offers other people a freedom and an empathy, to be their most authentic selves. And I think that is such an incredible offering.
Yeah. And that the centerpiece of it is curiosity. It feels like I was thinking about how, as a little girl or in grade school, I started to get embarrassed of asking a dumb question, that whole thing. And it's the permission to come back to your curiosity in so many ways. And I agree. I think it's personal, but then it's how we relate to each other. And I love the extrapolation that it's all a work in progress. Yeah.
And and I think it's when we can really embrace that and, like, just focus on the headlights, again, it's such an anxiety reducer, such a freedom giver. And that's where, like, creativity and our greatest contributions come from. So that's always what I hope to offer. And I'm just so grateful that you found my work and that it met you in the moment that you did. You are such a wonderful, steward and representative of this work.
Thank
And
you.
the way that you're going about, this exploration for yourself right now.
Thank you, Megan. Well, I'll end with a couple quick fun ones. The holidays for me are always inherently a time where things get a little quieter and more existential. I feel like I'm like looking at where I am and where I'm not, and like any words of encouragement or advice or like a grounding question that people can sit with at this time of year.
Where am I being led? I think is the biggest like forward looking question that I would ask moving into the new year. And then also what do I need to leave behind?
Yeah.
What is no longer working for me, even if you don't know how to get rid of that thing. It's so important to tell yourself the truth about your life, even if you don't know how to fix it.
Yeah, that's so good. Telling yourself the truth is like a hard and first step for sure. What would your 8-year-old self say to you today?
I think she would just be like, "You go, girl." I think she would be so excited about everything that I'm doing, and yeah, and just how like fun and full and whole my life feels. Like I truly feel like I'm living my most aligned life. That does not mean that there aren't places where I'm like, I don't know what's going on with here, or this isn't working, or blah blah blah. But like there are no huge areas where I'm like, what the hell, or this is not working. And I think she would be really proud that I like have trusted myself to build this life that is definitely not what I expected.
Yeah, but that only you could have built, like
Yeah.
uniquely from you. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would your 80-year-old self say?
Mm, the best is yet to come.
Oh, I love that. That's what my grandparents used to say. The best is yet to come.
I
He had
really
a
believe that these days.
I know because you have roots in Buffalo. My grandfather ran a publication for baby boomers in Buffalo, and the tagline was "The best is yet to come."
Oh my God, that's amazing. What publication?
You can't find it, man. It was like a print thing, like the old school huge paper
Yeah.
spreads. It's called Living Prime Time by Jerry Flashner. He was in
I wouldn't
media.
be surprised if it's like in my grandparents' basement.
Oh yeah, we'll have to check on that. What else? I like to ask, what's a ritual or practice that keeps you?
Um, Morning pages, daily
Mm,
journaling is huge. And I was so consistent with it for years and years and years. And having a baby makes it that I'm less consistent. And it really does, for me, really does have to be in the morning, not for everyone. And that I can feel it. And I really miss it when I don't get to do it. So it's the best that I can do right now. And when I can, it feels like a warm bath.
I love that. All
It's
right,
where I tell myself the truth about my life.
yeah, 100%. And the morning clarity is um is something special.
Yeah, yes. Mornings are huge, like magical, huge for me.
Yeah,
And that's where all my best thinking, work, writing, everything happens.
totally. All right, two more quick ones. The first is a Mad Libs. It's fill this out. I used to think blank, and now I know blank.
I used to think I had to know where I was going, and now I know that I don't need to know. And now I know that all I need to know is what is the single next directionally right step for me right now.
Perfect. And what is a truth about the season of life you're in right now?
I'm in my own sort of transition, or redefining. I think for several years, it was like probably 5 years, it was really clear what I was doing. It was like having a baby and writing a book. And those were the two things. And I had like a whole fertility journal, but it was like that was like it was so clear what I was doing. And it wasn't easy, but it was like there was no what am I working on? And both things were so clearly like things I wanted so deeply and so truly, there was no questioning. And now that the book is out and the baby is here, I'm figuring out what's sort of like I don't know, the next horizon for me.
It's amazing how your work holds you in integrity with doing it. Like I love that. I love that you create what you needed, and that's what your services and your contribution is.
And it continues to be what I need, you know, and I say this in the dedication, like I'm talking about having my daughter and how hard it was, but how that brought me into a new, fresh place of having to live directionally, like be in it again versus writing about what had happened in the past, which was true also, but like I was relearning it again. And I continue to relearn it. And it is so important to me that I walk the walk and practice what
Yeah.
I preach.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to share this book with this audience and your work. It has been a game changer for me this year, and I know it will continue to be.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so glad it resonated, and I can't wait to share it with everyone too.
Amazing.